Hello, Firebirds. When you hit go to start this session, I hope your motivation when you started it was intrinsic motivation. I hope you hit go because you were curious about what was going to be presented. You were interested to find out the next piece of discovery that AIM might provide for you. You're hungry to go in the direction of the destinations that AIM is pointing. You have a sense that what AIM is offering is really going to take you toward where you want to go. That's intrinsic motivation. And boy, I hope when you hit go, the energy in you was not, well, I have to do this, so I might as well start. Or, boy, I'm going to get in trouble if I don't watch this darn thing. Or, everybody else is watching it, so I guess I better stay up to date. Or I got a million other things to do. Let me squeeze it in while I cook some eggs at the same time. Those are extrinsic motivations. Intrinsic motivation, the second destination we're looking at, is the power source of what takes our young people to those goals, those outcomes of the destinations. The research is unambiguous. We achieve those destinations much further, much more effectively when young people intrinsically invest themselves in the work we offer. There's no arguing it. And I think of the enemy of intrinsic motivation is not resistance. The enemy of intrinsic motivation is compliance. People who go along with what you ask, kind of do what you want to do for extrinsic reasons. They're going to get in trouble if they don't. Maybe they get some rewards. They like you. Their friends are doing it. All those extrinsic motivators drive most of what people do in life. But high achievement, the kind of outcomes that it takes to move forward to the destinations we point, takes intrinsic motivation. And you just can't make somebody be intrinsically motivated. Each individual must give their hearts to the work. They must choose to invest in what we offer because it interests them, because they're curious about it, because it's resonating, is relevant and valuable. That's what we can do with our teaching. Create the conditions and the invitations so they may give us the gift of their energy, of their attention, of their eagerness to go where we point. That's why intrinsic motivation is the fuel that is absolutely essential to our achieving our outcomes. Before we go there today, we're going to take a little side trip first. I'm going to ask you to watch a 7.5-minute video that I made for AIM a few years ago. And it's a little bit different than what we talk about in AIM usually. It introduces a systems analysis perspective on the challenges our whole field faces. A way of thinking about how we get to those destinations. And it concludes with an argument for why experimentation is the only way we can get there. That may not be clear right now, but I hope it is at the end of watching this video, that in fact, experimentation is the only way we can achieve our outcomes. So watch the video, and when you come back, I'm going to give you a homework assignment that invites you to apply the ideas from the video to your own work. Thank you for taking a couple of minutes for me to share with you the Cynefin framework, which had such an impact on me when I first encountered it. I'm delighted at the opportunity to share it with you. It answered a question I had carried for years, which was partly, Why is music education not transforming the world? All this powerful knowledge that we have and the high impact opportunities we have, why have we plateaued? Why aren't we continuing to lift off? And this explained it to me. So I'm going to take a couple of moments to describe the framework in general, and then I'm going to apply it to the way AIM thinks about the contribution it can make to the world. The Cynefin framework looks at 4 different ways of describing problems. You could almost say 4 different categories of problems. Let me introduce them. There are simple problems, which can be exemplified in how do you make a cookie? Not so hard. We know a lot about this. Follow the recipe, conditions are stable. If you do what expertise tells you, right ingredients, right temperature in the oven, right cooking implements, you're going to get a pretty good cookie. That's a simple problem. A complicated problem is basically a simple problem on steroids, and the example we can use to typify it is getting a rocket to the moon. It's the algorithm, the basic reliable data is all there. The laws of physics are consistent, and given conditions that are regular and the expertise that we know, when we put all those pieces together, listen to the experts, we can actually eventually get a rocket to the moon. Not to say it's easy, but when we pull expertise together, we can do it. Let us not spend a lot of time in chaos, but that's where the conditions are not stable. There is no expertise that can be brought in to sort it out. The work of chaos is to just find a few places to begin creating order, so some of these challenges can be moved over onto this side, so you can begin to pull some order into the chaos. I really want us to focus on this distinction because this was the breakthrough for me and that I hope the field can learn about. The example of a complex problem, as opposed to getting that rocket to the moon, think about raising a child. The conditions of raising a child are never reliable. Circumstances are constantly changing and require adaptation as you go. There is no guaranteed expertise that, if applied, is going to turn into excellent child rearing. And if you happen to luck into a system that worked for your first kid, you try it on that second kid, and it is not going to work on the second kid. We have to admit there is no known reliable way to successfully raise a child. The way you succeed is with short-term experiments, and I'll bet this is resonating for parents. Short-term experiments with rapid feedback loops. You try stuff based on the circumstances, you see how things go, and you figure out the next step from there. What's significant about short-term experiments with rapid feedback loops, it's the only thing that works when you are involved in a complex problem. In music education, especially for kids who haven't had the good fortune of wealthier and more privileged kids, most music education tries to deal with that as a complicated problem. We know about music education. We can produce high-quality violinists. If you follow the Suzuki system, you're going to get a success. And you will get a limited success that will not address the social transformation that is the potential AIM cares about. If you are looking for social transformation through the power tool of music, that lives in the complex quadrant. And as much as you may want it to be over here, and as much as you may try to bring it over here into known ways of teaching, you are gonna fail. You are not going to achieve significant social transformation. And that's why I think our field plateaued for a while.
As teachers came in from this world, from the music education knowledge, and tried to apply those tools over there, they had some success, but they weren't achieving the social transformation that was powerful. AIM's way of looking at this is to say, okay, let's build in short-term experiments with rapid feedback loops into teaching pedagogy so that we can reach these children in this culture, in this program, and really activate that potential, which is why we train our teaching artists not by teaching them pedagogy, but teaching them action research, so they can become effective experimenters who learn reliably from the data they produce in their teaching and make next experiments that are more powerful as they're teaching their colleagues what they learned from the previous one. We are learning our way forward through experimentation and effective learning. And as we start to develop our knowledge, some of our tools are going to come over here for the whole rest of the field. Here's some tools we have developed that you over there in music education or programs that are starting, use these. These are reliable to produce agency, to produce community, to produce intrinsic motivation in our learners. We're going to get them out widely, but they come from the work that is necessary and appropriate in the complex quadrant so that we can change the world through work in the wider complicated world. And our Firebirds enter the world through this lens as opposed to this lens which has kept us at half speed. We're going for full speed, and that's through the Firebird Fellowship.
I hope that was clear. I hope the distinction between a complex challenge, one where the conditions aren't stable, and you can't just apply known expertise, known ways of doing things to get the results, where you have to experiment in order to work forward, short experiments with radical intent, as opposed to complicated problems, where if you apply known expertise, you're going to get pretty reliable results. For homework, see if you can apply that thinking to your own work. Would you identify a complex challenge in your teaching that matters to you and see if you can phrase it as a question? So, for example, and you don't have to pick this example for yourself, but just as an example, we waste a lot of time at the beginning of classes with tuning and students chatting and getting things ready. How can I create a pattern of immediate full engagement? That's a complex challenge. The conditions are not stable. There's no known expertise that applies to the exact situation you've got. So what you do is experiment, action research. Filling out your homework. If you were going to pick that example, write it out as a question, and then describe briefly what kind of experiment you might try that would give you information for further solving that complex challenge in class. Here's another example. Also, you don't have to pick this. When I ask my students for ideas about how we might make our performance piece better, all I get is blank stares and silence. What can I do to activate their contribution with musical ideas? That's a complex challenge. So if you were going to take that as the one for your homework assignment, you'd start to think, what are some routines or rituals? What are some activities I could try to see if it starts to bring up students' willingness to offer artistic ideas? That would be how you'd answer that question. So pick a complex challenge that matters to your teaching and see what you can come up with. By the way, whenever I am talking to a teaching artist in Music for Social Change, and we're talking about a complex problem, if I hear them say, "Oh, I know how to do that," I immediately know I am watching someone translate a complex problem into a complicated problem, and the solution they're going to offer is not going to work. Let's not do that. See if you can stay clear on what a complex problem is and what an experiment might do. And by the way, if you're interested in this, in how the Cynefin framework applies to our work, I wrote an essay about it about 15 years ago. It's kind of a long essay, but we'll give you a link in case you want to see further, think further about how the Cynefin framework really might have a significant impact on the way we work in our programs in AIM. So let's turn our attention a little bit more now toward the destination of intrinsic motivation. There's a lot of research around intrinsic motivation, and we're not going to focus so much on that research today. We're going to look more about one piece of it, and this is the term growth mindset. Is that term familiar to you? It's going to be if it's not. A growth mindset is a belief or attitude that one's abilities and intelligence can be developed over time through dedication, hard work, and perseverance. A growth mindset believes that musical talent is not something fixed or something you got to be born with, but it can be developed or enhanced over time through practice, dedication, and learning. With a growth mindset in music, young people believe they have enormous potential to get good if they practice well, and that challenges are to be welcomed and not feared, that feedback and failure are not things to be scared of, but really useful in getting better. It's an attitude, it's a perspective. And it's essential that we organize our classes to support that point of view rather than the fearful, anxious, fixed mindset that a lot of musical training develops in musicians. I'm going to ask you to read an article that has a video embedded in it. It's about growth mindset. And as you read the article and watch that video, I also want you to think about your own growth mindset. Are there areas in your life where you have a fixed mindset? Are there other areas in your life where you have a growth mindset? And maybe most poignantly, because you are as an example as a teacher, do you have a growth mindset about your teaching skills? Do you believe that you are on the pathway to becoming one of those great, unforgettable, amazing teachers that changes kids' lives? You know the kind I'm talking about. If you doubt that, you have a fixed mindset about your potential as a teacher. In AIM, when we look at you with our growth mindset, we see you as potentially one of those great teachers that students never forget because they changed their lives. So bring that growth mindset about your own potential as a teacher to your discovery of growth mindset in general. Okay, I hope you have a bit of a feel about growth mindset, what it is, some of the ways we can nurture it in our students, and how it applies to you personally. It's time for a two-part homework. First part, in writing up to about 200 words in your learning journal, what is one of your current teaching practices that does not help students develop a growth mindset? Can you identify one thing that you naturally do in your teaching that actually isn't great for developing growth mindset in your students? Would you identify that thing you naturally do? No shame in it. We all do. One thing that could do with a little work, a little rethinking so that it builds growth mindset. And see if you can think of something else you could do instead of that. Is there a routine? Is there a ritual? Is there a way of teaching that, following the guidelines from that article, would actually build growth mindset in your students where currently you aren't? Routines and rituals are powerful because they're consistent, they're regular, they happen all the time. Often they don't need to take very long. So it becomes a short, strategic way that you build a new capacity in your students. So you're going to take a chunk of time and answer that question. Up to 200 words, doesn't need to be a long essay. And when you're done with that, go immediately to a part 2 assignment, which is, quick before you forget, write some notes about how you answered that first question. Can you remember as many things as possible that you did to come up with your 200-word answer? What are the mental things you did? What are the steps you went through to go from some understanding of what growth mindset means to identifying where in your practice it lives, making the choice of this one, thinking about what's not so good about it, maybe what might be some alternative ideas, picking one of those ideas, figuring out how you're going to describe it? Can you write down everything you can remember about how you went about doing that? Even write down to how you chose the words you were going to write down to describe it precisely in less than 200 words. And here's why I want you to go through that reflective exercise of noticing what you did, because that is metacognition. That is the third aspect of intrinsic motivation. So practice on your own recent experience. See if you can detail as much as possible. Metacognition is noticing how you work, becoming aware of the processes you use, of the steps you take, of the ways that are effective in solving problems, of the things that are harder for you. Take some quick notes on that while it's still fresh in your mind to remind you of what metacognition feels like. Because in our next session, we're going to look at how important it is as a skill for your learners, as a habit of mind, for them to notice in what ways they are good learners, to become more efficient and effective as learners, to get some confidence in their learning strengths. So the second part of this homework assignment is for you to practice your own metacognition on the challenge about growth mindset in your teaching. Thanks. See you soon.